If you can have that vision of improving whatever it is or changing whatever it is, that's going to fuel your drive. And there's going to be ups and downs if you decide to go the startup path, because that's just me. I always tell my physician friends, don't be intimidated by these tech people. We have different skill sets, but that doesn't mean that you can't be collaborative. It doesn't mean that you don't have anything to bring to the table, because the average physician is not only intelligent, but we can multitask, we can prioritize things, problem solve, especially in high stakes situations, really applicable to so many fields.
Welcome to Startup Physicians. I'm Dr. Allison Kerfman, and today we're exploring innovation in pediatric emergency medicine with Dr. Alana Arnold. From identifying gaps in pediatric readiness to launching digital health solutions, Dr. Arnold shows how clinical experience can spark entrepreneurial solutions. Please like and follow our show to join our community of physicians who are reimagining healthcare delivery. Hi, welcome to Startup Physicians. I'm Allison Kerfman, and I'm very excited to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Alana Arnold, here with us today. Hi, Alana.
Hi, Allison. How are you?
Great. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest on this very new podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. It's great to have you. And I was so excited when you agreed to join, because I think you and I have known each other for a while. We have our peds emergency medicine connection, and I've definitely kept tabs on all the different things you've been doing over the past few years, because I think that your journey really emphasizes a lot of options for other physicians to think about, and also really shows your creativity and your way of looking at problems. And I would love to just start by hearing a little bit about your story and your journey and how you got involved in startups.
Yes, absolutely. So thanks again for having me, Allison. I'm very excited to be here. So in a nutshell, as you mentioned, we are in the same specialty. I'm a pediatric ER doctor, still working clinically. And really, I had trained in super academic centers, children's hospitals, as I did my residency and then fellowship. And my first job after I finished training was in a children's hospital, but I got recruited down to a different facility in Florida, where they wanted to open up a children's ER in a community setting. So this health system had just acquired a hospital in the community, and they wanted to have a pediatric ER presence at that time. So I was recruited down to be the director there. So this was my first time working in a non-children's hospital setting.
Yes.
So
I relate to that.
yes, absolutely. I was kind of just blown away with the care that the kids were receiving, right? This was not a rural facility, it was metropolitan, but there were a lot of issues with what we call pediatric readiness. So how competent a facility is to stabilize and care for kids in a community setting. Again, this is not any slight on the clinicians, because general ER doctors have great skill sets. They have to learn a lot of stuff to practice. But unfortunately, their pediatric knowledge is sometimes limited just because they don't see as many kids and the same type of pathology and things like that. And so while I was there, I noticed that not only was there a clinical gap, but also simple things that we take for granted, like having the proper equipment. Kids come in all different sizes. You got to be ready for a 2-month-old or a 12-year-old with airway stuff, ortho stuff, all that type of thing. So the way that they present are varied and wide ranging. And you have to kind of understand those nuances, because most kids aren't going to run in and say, hey, I'm about to have a respiratory arrest. So, as I was going through all of this, realizing like equipment was an issue, but then also the protocols, like standardized approaches to protocols, was an issue, because there was really no oversight. There was not a pediatric point person who could help direct these clinicians to give the best care possible. And that's when the wheels started turning. I had just started in this facility essentially as the pandemic was starting. It was springtime of 2020. So we had some downtime because the volumes dropped off. I was thinking, okay, how can I use my skill set as someone who's trained in academic facilities, level 1 trauma center for children's hospitals? How can I use my skill set to help these clinicians give the best care possible? Because you and I both know that's where most kids are seen at first pass. Like the average kid, when
Oh
they're
yeah,
sick,
in the community.
absolutely. So, like 4 out of 5 kids, when they're sick, they go to the nearest ER urgent care to get initial care and go from there. And so, when I had some downtime, I was thinking, how can I amplify my skill set to help these clinicians? And that's really what started me developing my initial startup, Pen Pal, to focus on pediatric readiness. So, we developed clinical simulations where we were really targeting clinicians on what you need to know right now to help care for that child, that asthmatic who's coming in. What is the escalation you need to think about? What are airway equipment you need to think about? Medications, all that stuff. Instead of like these long didactic lectures, like real time in 5 minutes, what do you need to know
Yeah.
right now?
And it sounds like this all came from your clinical day-to-day work, seeing a gap
Yep,
in what you think that kids need and what the facilities or the clinicians are equipped to handle. Um,
absolutely.
been an issue that has been really highlighted in a lot of the pediatric publications around pediatric readiness. It's an
Hmm.
issue very near and
Yeah.
dear to hearts of all peds emergency physicians. There are many thousands of us that think about the pediatric readiness gap,
Hmm.
but not everyone goes to make a solution and tries to think, how could this not just change the place that I work, but how could I build this in a way that could actually help other hospitals, other
Hmm.
community, creating a product that's really focused on what you can deliver in the form of education,
Yeah.
checklists, equipment oversight. And I think that that is a very, very different mindset. A lot of us
Hmm.
really focus on the job that we have and the place that we are. And I would say the majority of people have probably hundreds of things in their day-to-day clinical practice that they wish were different.
Yeah.
It takes a certain type of mind to actually say, "Hey, I'm gonna try something that could fix this," as opposed to just,
Sure.
"It's that this is how it's gonna be."
Yeah.
And a very separate leap to say, "Hey, I could actually do this elsewhere or create something that could be useful for larger." So what
Yes.
do you think made you think that way?
It's just like a personality thing. I was able to get my MBA when I was in med school. So I always loved problem solving and kind of how can I build solutions on a broader scale. I knew that as a physician, we're only going to be able to see so many patients in our career, but something like pediatrics, where there's such variety in terms of access to care and things like that around the country, I was always very keen to say, how can I use my skills on a larger platform to affect change?
Your MBA was part of what made you think that way, or do you think it was
I
that
think it's innate. I
you
think,
realized that this is are structured?
yeah, I think part of it is like my innate personality, but also knowing that when I was in medical school and got my MBA, it was focused on healthcare management and being able, especially in our specialty in the ER, we interface with every part of the hospital, right? Like inpatient, ICU, radiology, everyone touches the ER. And so I was very interested in how processes work, how to be efficient, how to optimize care, even when I was in med school. And so having that lens about, yes, I'm delivering clinical care, but I'm not working in a vacuum. There are other things that affect my clinical care. And I think all physicians can relate to that. And it's just really how you approach the problem to say, okay, I'm either going to put my head down and stay in my lane and do what I can, or taking a step back to say, all right, I'm trying to do A, B, and C, but D, E, and F are affecting me. So how can we kind of partner, address this gap, whatever the issue is, to make something synergistic, to make the whole thing run a bit smoother. That was kind of always my mindset in terms of problem solving around issues instead of just taking a myopic view,
Sure.
taking a broader view about how to address the needs at play.
One of the things I actually emphasize to most physicians that come to me is that even though I do also have an MBA, I was fortunate to be able to get that during my fellowship, and I think, in some ways can be a really great addition to your skill sets and training. But I really like to emphasize that you don't need an
No,
MBA to do
definitely
this.
not a necessity. 100% agree. I always say, like, if you can get someone to pay for it and you have the time, great. But otherwise, keep it moving. I agree 100%.
And there's ways that we can, you know, educate ourselves and join, communities like this one to
Hmm.
inspired and to continue to obtain knowledge, because what I think is really different about this world is the way of thinking.
Hmm.
And it's something that can be learned without getting an MBA. So I think you've already spoken about some of the ways that you thought differently when you started your first startup. Looking at a bigger view, a systems view, I personally love to understand process. You mentioned that the ER touches everything, and I think we all have a pretty good understanding of where a lot of the problems are.
Yep.
And I think that there is probably an over representation of emergency medicine in the startup space, which is awesome. I know
Yes. Yeah.
went to the health conference this year and pretty big showing of emergency physicians. I think we're kind of trained to MacGyver things and to
Absolutely. Figure it out. Work with what you got to get what you want.
And I think there is a level of risk tolerance as well,
Mhm.
but you're representing the emergency medicine perspective really well. But do you feel like you had to take a lot of risk to start this first company, or was it just like
Yeah.
a passion project?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. Because I was very, very passionate. For me, that was what was driving it. I was tired and frustrated at simple things that could be fixed. Kids being intubated with the wrong size tubes. They were being transferred because they didn't know the appropriate sizing formulas, or someone didn't know to order such and such size. Things that really do very directly affect patient care. And so it was coming from a place of, yeah, frustration, but also understanding, working in a community setting, working with my general ER doctors side by side, that, no one shows up to work to do a bad job. These are competent clinicians who want to have that support, who want to have that skill set, and kind of roadmap to navigate some of the more challenging pediatric cases. And so my goal was really to say, how can I help support them and augment their skill set to make sure that they are given the support that they need to perform at the highest level when you or I are not there. That's just the fact of it, that there is a minority of pediatric ER doctors and the majority of kids are seen in the community. So how do we bridge this gap to make sure that the kids are getting the care that they need where they are being seen? A lot of it just came out of that passion and frustration, but also, as you mentioned, taking the risk to say, yeah, believing in my abilities. I'm a physician, I'm trained, I'm competent, I'm a smart person, especially working in the ER. We can adapt. We really kind of are pros at, okay, these are, yeah, agile. These are the resources we have. This is where I want to go. What can I use to cobble some together to get there? And taking that risk to kind of be confident enough to say, I have something to contribute to this space. I have something in terms of expertise in this area, and think differently from someone who's coming from a strictly business background or strictly technical background, where we can collaborate to solve this problem appropriately. So I think
Sure.
that, yeah, as you mentioned, your personal story, like, everyone has a different risk tolerance. Some people are like, hey, I'm going all in at this time, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm kind of learning as I go along. I think I'm somewhere maybe a little bit in the middle, where kind of working in tandem with my day to day stuff, but also, as you mentioned, going to those conferences, trying to network. I always say, like, this is one thing I would say to any of the physicians in the audience: really never turn down an opportunity to connect with someone. You have no idea what that can lead to. It might not be the right connection at that time, but that person can think of you in the future about something. They can refer you to somebody, and really, it's the biggest assets you have outside of your own personal skill set, because you've helped me connect with people, and it's amazing to think about how many people are doing such great things, but we're just kind of siloed, unfortunately, depending where you are. So really maintaining that network is critical. so that you can keep leveling up and growing in your own startup endeavors. Because I've seen that be very, very true for myself.
Yeah. So I want to ask kind of some of the technical details about you,
Mm,
and then I want to also get to the other work that you're doing
yes.
currently. But when you decided to focus on pediatric readiness, what were the steps that you took? Did you talk to your organization about making it, you know,
Yeah.
something within your organization, or did you decide I'm going to form an entity? I'm just going to start creating materials. How
Yeah.
were you thinking, and what steps did you take?
When I was like working clinically at the facility, I did, develop clinical training and things like that. As you well know, that 99% of the time, if you develop something at a facility, it's proprietary to them, especially as an employee. And so I took the decision to create a separate entity down the line to focus on my own content that I developed separate from the clinical job that I had at the time. For me, that made the most sense in terms of just protecting my own intellectual property and making sure that things were as clean as possible. So, thinking further down the line, what would funding look like? What would just
Did you fundraise?
uh, no, no, not yet, not yet. But I think just having that mindset, because when you approach investors, they want things as simple and clean as possible. So that was a step that I took at that time.
Yeah, this was a lot of forethought. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
again, an example of how you think differently.
Mm,
Uh, and also just to show how much you've been able to develop
mm,
without funding, without someone backing you. And
yeah.
it has been a passion project for you, because this is how we met at first. And it was again a network thing that somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to meet Alana. She's doing so much work in peds emergency medicine." And say our paths crossed a bunch since then. But what do you think was the catalyst for you, other than, I mean, obviously the mission is really important. Did you feel like you
Mm,
had to take a lot of personal risk? I mean, it sounds like you were
mm,
still working in your job, had some barriers around, like, if you're affiliated with an organization that you're not technically allowed to develop something else. Did you
mhm.
go through all those technical things to
Yeah,
figure out?
that's a good question. So yeah, so I've switched jobs since then. One thing I would say is, especially depending on your position, right? I think if you are pursuing any startup endeavors, if you're still going to be employed by someone, always make sure that you speak with a lawyer in terms of what your contract looks like, what your carve out looks like for consulting capabilities, just your own protected time. Because especially in academic medicine, that can be very, very finicky.
Yes, I've heard of things that range from, some organizations are like, all you have to do is declare it. So if
Hmm.
you're working on outside things, we just have to know about it. So it's as simple as like a form that you
Yeah.
fill out and you sign, they sign. You're like, I am working on this and my compensation is this. It could be nothing, it could be equity, it could be hourly. And this is not going to interfere with my current
Yeah,
job.
day to day. Yeah.
Others I've heard of that if they are doing some sort of consulting while they are employed by their employer, the employer insists on taking a cut, which
Hmm.
that's the way some things are structured, but
Yeah.
something to keep in mind. And then there's others that say if you develop anything at all whatsoever with your brain on the weekend, with your kid, whatever it is,
Hmm.
while you are employed by us, we own it.
Yep.
We own
Yep.
it. It's not yours.
Outright.
And takes off and does really well, it's ours, not yours. So
Yeah.
those are really important things to know about your contract. So I think that's
Absolutely. Yeah, so I always say, always have contract lawyer yourself to make sure whatever you are signing fits with what you want to be doing and that you're clear about what you're getting into in terms of those limitations or stipulations that are going to be set on you. So that would be the first step I definitely recommend in terms of technical stuff. Also, there's tons of content out there, right? LegalZoom in terms of like forming the entity and things like that. It's actually pretty straightforward, but in the physician community, odds are some of us or the majority of us know some lawyers in some capacity. So again, I always just say leverage your network. I always joke with my friends who are lawyers. None of them personally have been able to help me because they're all in different fields. I feel like it's very different from physicians. It's like that might not be my specialty, but odds are I can connect you with someone. So he told me about people who are helpful in the startup space. But that
Yeah.
would be something I definitely recommend off the bat as you're starting to think about things, because just how my personality is, I try to be very pragmatic about it. Like, hey, yeah, we're pre-revenue, but can I try to set this up appropriately so that I have a good foundation?
Yeah, you're looking to the future of what
Yeah,
this company could look like. And, even if someone does find that they're in a position where consulting would be challenging based on their contract, there are ways to, invest in your education and your understanding of the field
yeah,
and understanding what opportunities there are, even if it's a little passive, like listening to podcasts. And that sort of thinking is what primes me to be able to make a move when the opportunity arose. So
hmm. And then I
even
think
have a bad contract, there's opportunity for you. And
yeah, because it's baby steps. Like I think just putting yourself out there, like if you are seeing an issue or problem that you're interested in and trying to change, start connecting with people in that field. So LinkedIn is a fantastic example, but also just attending conferences. It doesn't mean that you have to be like a premier expert in A, B, and C, but just meeting like-minded people can be so enlightening, and you're continually building your network so that when you are ready to take those further steps, you kind of have a little bit of buffer, a little bit of cushion, and people that can serve as like a soundboard to you, which is really important.
yeah. So what happened for you next? So you developed all these resources. You thought
Mm,
about how to structure it in a way that could grow and could help
yes.
more than your hospital. What happened next?
Yeah. So I switched jobs. Um, and currently, I'm very happy to say that there's a technical component. We have an initial prototype of a web app that serves as a clinical decision support tool for ER doctors. So we have protocols around asthma, bronchiolitis, and fever workup in neonates, some of the top things that people see in the community. Right now, our next goal is developing this into a more robust app that can interface with EHRs so that clinicians can have access to it in these community settings to make sure that they're following evidence-based protocols. So I'm super excited that we've been able to get into an incubator program to kind of move things forward with that.
Tell
Um,
me about
yeah, so a friend of a friend told me about this incubator program where they basically help you coach and kind of guide you in building the technical aspect of your startup. So for us, again, as you know, I am not a technical person at all. And so when I did the initial prototype, I contracted with someone who I had met at a conference, actually, who has become a good friend. So we have our initial prototype built, but I knew that, especially in the ER setting, the clinician's workflow is so critical. So if we weren't able to plug into their workflow with the EHR, this probably will not take off. So that can take tons and tons of money on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars and a lot of legwork to try to, connect with any of the big players in the EHR space. But what we're trying to do is really just on a smaller scale, develop something in terms of like an MVP, minimal viable product, in terms of a proof of concept, some validation that this tool is actually helpful. So we applied to the incubator, got notice that we were accepted. And so I'm very excited to start with this team where they're going to be coaching us and guiding us as I contract with the tech team to build out the product. It's just like amazing in terms of like, yeah, you just connect. You never know what's going to happen. You apply
never
and
figure out an opportunity to connect.
absolutely, because if I hadn't gone to that conference and spoke to that tech person and all those types of things down the line, this is now like 2 years ago we met. So yeah, things just come to fruition to allow us to keep moving the company forward.
That's awesome. And you started another company?
Yes, yes, yes. I
That's
can't
the
get enough.
problem. You started, you get another idea, and it's like, okay, I got this one going, and now I got something else. It's kind of a problem, and it's becoming
Yes.
a problem, and now I see a solution. So what's your other company?
Yeah, so the second company is called Parent Partners, and it is a kids' health platform tailored for parents and families to increase their health literacy. So, again, this was born out of practicing in the ER. We see a whole range of families, some who have very poor health literacy, but even others who have high health literacy but have issues with access to their primary care, getting in for appointments or specialty appointments in a timely fashion. I always say, like, the average parent, right? If you're concerned about your kid and you feel that they're sick and need medical care, odds are you're not going to say, "Hey, you know what? That's cool. We'll wait for this 6-month visit." Like
Yeah.
you want to get this taken care of now. You're concerned, and so just seeing time and time again these families come in, common things like asthma. Asthma is one of the most common pediatric ailments, but it is so very often mismanaged and misunderstood by families, that leads to increased morbidity, mortality, high usage of the ER, ICU stays, all of those things that add to the healthcare costs in our country. So I was thinking about, okay, how can I pivot to provide some services to the consumer, right, to our patients to help them get better care? Because again, I cannot have a clinic of 10 million patients, but what can I use to help meet them where they are to try to improve clinical outcomes? So another connection, a friend of mine I met at a conference, who's a physician as well, developed a mobile app, and this app is basically like a marketplace for physicians to have educational content, and the patients can engage, subscribe to it to get the content. So, parent partners, we've been very lucky. We have 7 programs developed. They range from asthma, nutritional support for childhood obesity. We have programming around mental health issues, kind of signs and
Did you
symptoms.
develop all this content or did you have
Yeah. So it was a collaboration and my own pediatric knowledge and whatnot, but also sourcing information that's already out there. Because that's another thing I want to mention. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there are tons of pediatricians, tons of competent pediatricians and educational bodies and things like that, where they have all this information, but how can we package it so that people can have access to it outside of the physician's office? And nowadays, I think it's upwards of over 98% of people have a smartphone. So it's something you can access right in the palm of your hand. It's seamless. You don't have to book an appointment, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really very excited about delivering this care, this educational content direct to the families. And we're looking actually right now for clinics to pilot our programming at parent partners to get feedback in terms of patient engagement and clinical outcomes, especially around asthma care, mental health issues, and childhood obesity. So, very excited about that.
congrats on that too? It sounds like
Thank you.
you have a lot going on and you still practice?
Yes, it's yeah. So, still have my clinical work going. I think it's just a matter of creating that, yeah, that balance, whatever that personal balance is for you. Because I still really very much enjoy seeing the patients. Like, kids are a riot. It's never a dull moment in the ER.
Yes.
um, so very much enjoy still seeing them, whilst maintaining and focusing on kind of building out this content, and these different initiatives to hopefully, in the next few years, be able to pivot to do it more full time. But I feel that I'll always still keep some, per diem, clinical shifts here and there to
Sure.
keep my skill set up.
Do you feel like your involvement in these companies that you're building and ideas that you're pursuing and having that as a creative outlet and a way to have an action in response to the problems you're seeing, do you think that has helped you avoid burnout in your clinical job?
Yes, 100%. I think that's a really good point to bring up because it's sad to say, I'm not far out of training. I finished fellowship in 2018. I have friends who have completely left medicine in the past 6 years that we've been done. I have friends, very good friends, who are very burnt out, and they recognize that they're burnt out, but they feel trapped. And so I think it's so critical in terms of physicians just taking ownership of our own field, essentially, and our own lives to say, you've worked so hard to get to where you are. Hopefully, still passionate about the clinical care. So, what can I do to maintain that freshness, to maintain that passion, that drive, to help people? And it's not an easy thing to do because depending on the facility you're at, that can be very challenging. Feeling not only like burnt out, but just undervalued, not listened to, things like that. It can be very, very challenging. But for me, having these outlets, because I'm able to use my skill sets in different ways, and I can see the progress that I've made over the past few years. It's really exciting for me and gives me that energy boost to say, I'm on the right path. I'm doing what I'm passionate about. And I really feel that, I have a purpose in the work that I'm doing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that we're all potential victims of burnout. I think that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of problems on the day-to-day basis that really affect our ability to keep going and to keep doing this work for patients, and
Mhm.
especially in an emergency setting where,
Yeah.
things can be really challenging, understaffed, and you can be dealing with a lot of life and death situations
Hmm.
and a lot of stress from patients and families and 5-hour waits. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that applies to a lot of fields, but I think of startups or creative work as being a protective factor. I feel like I share your sentiment that I am excited to go to emergency medicine
Hmm.
shifts. I have made it a priority to continue to see patients in the ER. I love talking to kids. I love
Hmm.
talking to families.
Hmm.
It feels like by having it be something that I choose to do and enjoy doing it, it has raised my compassion and my empathy,
Yeah.
even things that I previously would have thought, oh, this is such
Right.
a reason to come to the ER, or their expectations are unreasonable.
Hmm.
Uh, it's really helped me to, like, little things just don't bother me on my shifts that maybe
Yeah. Let it
would if
roll off
working
your back.
there. So, and like you said, I feel like having a more creative outlet of how you can use clinical knowledge and your mind to help really find new ways to solve problems in medicine. It is a protective factor against
Hmm.
burnout. It is a way for us to use the knowledge and the clinical minds that we already have to
Yep.
make an impact in a different way.
Absolutely.
I would love to hear if you have any last comments or thoughts. You had an amazing journey. I've been so privileged to know you these years and watch your progress. Is there anything else you would say to this audience who is probably more on the pre-contemplative part of the curve?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say to any of our colleagues in the audience, like, don't sell yourself short. As you said before, like, if you have become a physician, you are a smart, capable person, and the sky's the limit. It's really up to you how you want to use that skill set. Doesn't mean that you need to go out and try to launch 10 startups at once and all that, but just really believe in yourself and have the confidence you are capable. And for me, it has been the simplest is find what you're passionate about because you really can't go wrong. If you're passionate about something, see that there's an issue or you want to improve something, etc., that's where you're going to get your energy from. Because if you can have that vision of improving whatever it is or changing whatever it is, that's going to fuel your drive. And there's going to be ups and downs if you decide to go the startup path because that's just life. But I think it's key, and I always tell my physician friends, like, as you mentioned, like, don't be intimidated by these tech people. We have different skill sets, but that doesn't mean that you can't be collaborative. It doesn't mean that you don't have anything to bring to the table because, there was a time where physicians were revered. I think that that's long gone, but there was a reason for that because the average physician is not only intelligent, but we can multitask, we can prioritize things, we can shoot, problem solve, all these things, especially in high stakes situations that can are really applicable to so many fields. So I would just say take a step back and give yourself that pat on the back that whatever space you're in right now, whatever mindset you're in, is that you are capable and that you should follow your intuition and really follow your own passion and compass as to taking the next step forward. So that's my little mini motivational
Awesome.
roundup for the physician.
Thank you so much. So, if people want to find your
Yes.
companies, can you
Yes.
share both of your companies' websites?
Absolutely. So the first pediatric readiness company we have is PenPal, PEMPAL.co. You can find us online at penpal.co. The second company is Parent Partners, and our website is parentpartners.co. You can find us there. We have our content all up. The biggest way that I'd love to connect is really just a discovery call, booking a meeting where we can explore how we can work together and what the needs are of the potential client. We have our Instagram as well. for Parent Partners, which is called My Parent Partners. You can find us. We have a lot of content that we put up, as well as on YouTube and Facebook. You can find us there as well for Parent Partners.
Awesome. And I know you are part of our Facebook community. So hopefully if people have questions for you after this episode, they can find you there or on your website, book a call with you, or I'd like people to get a hold of you.
Yes, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. So I am in the Facebook group, but LinkedIn, you can find me there. Alana J. Arnold, just pull up my profile. And that's probably the easiest way to connect with me so that we can, carry on further conversations.
Perfect. Well, we will make sure to include all of those contact pieces in our show notes. I really want to thank you for your time today, for your passion, your energy, your motivation. I love hearing stories of people that are doing things differently and are really driven by a motivation that comes from the heart. So I definitely see that in you, and I really am grateful for your friendship and your time. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison. My pleasure. Thank you.
That's all for today's episode with Dr. Alana Arnold. Find her companies at pempal.co and parentpartners.co, or connect with her on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to Startup Physicians. Don't forget to like, follow, and share.